Welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast that's all about real conversations for real transformation. I'm your host, Kat Pulcinelli, professional speaker, MC, and best-selling international author. Here, we tackle the tough stuff, the mud that we all have found ourselves in. We talk about the pivots, the challenges, and the victories that shape our lives and our businesses. From overcoming trauma and finding your voice to navigating life's unexpected twists, we get raw, honest, and open. You'll hear from inspiring guests who share their stories of resilience, healing, and growth. Whether it's breaking through emotional abuse, embracing self-worth, or thriving in entrepreneurship, you'll find connection, empowerment, and the tools to keep you moving forward. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and get ready for stories that hit home and conversations that make a difference. Let's get real together. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I am so excited to have you here with me today, and I can't even call her phenomenal. There's so many words for her. I am so excited to have this conversation. So, FYI to anybody listening, we are going to be diving really deep into some things. So you are going to want to take notes. You're going to want to be aware of the conversation. But Ruby, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Kat. I really appreciate it.
You are so welcome. I am so excited to have this conversation. I know you and I have had quite a few off camera as well. And there's a lot of things that overlap, a lot with my past and some of your stuff. And just, I'm so excited to see this intersection where we get to have this conversation on this platform for so many people to be able to hear. So as we dive in, please do me a favor and tell everybody who you are, what it is that you do, and then what got you into that space.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for giving me this time. My name is Ruby, and I am an author. I've written a book about healing from narcissistic abuse, Journeys from Abuse to Freedom. And my work has actually just happened. And I say that because I've been doing it for so long, I didn't even realize that I was working in domestic violence. I didn't know those two words. So I was helping people voluntarily, but somebody would be introduced to me and I would just help them. I became involved in something called the Muslim Women's Helpline in London, which was established in 1989. That's how old I am. Don't tell anyone. And what we found was that there were so many issues that were not being addressed. So there was a lovely lady called Imelda who was already working in something called the Samaritans. And she opened up another channel and we started working with women again, very privately. Nobody ever knew what was happening to them and we never recorded anything. So as far as anybody's concerned, they don't exist because people didn't want their information out there. It wasn't until 2005 that I started working officially in the field of domestic violence that I realized I'd been doing domestic violence work all my life and basically just went right into it. I transitioned from domestic violence work to probation because women kept saying that their partners were absolutely horrific. And they were, the things that were being done, absolutely horrific. But in my heart, I know that people are not all bad. Some things happen. So because of that, I entered the criminal justice system. And then I realized, oh, this is why these men behave as they do. And then I learned from their histories, from all the records that we have, mental health, all the psychological reports and such. So I got like a 360-degree insight into domestic violence from both men and women as victims and as abusers. And as time has gone along, other channels have opened up. I now do trauma work as well. But that's where I kind of come from. And here we are today.
I love this journey too, because it's really interesting. And, you know, I know we've talked about this before, but for anybody else that's out there that's listening, there are so many people that maybe have even found themselves in a domestic violence situation and didn't even realize that that's what it was. I mean, I know I didn't realize that that's what it was until after I
Mm.
had my ex arrested. And what's really interesting is I remember probably about 4 years before I left a shoe store that I was working at, I actually had a lady that was asking me, like, why does he always bring you to work? Why can't you drive yourself? And I was like, oh, we just have one car and he's got to have it for the kids. And she was like, why does he have to sit with the vehicle outside of the doors to watch you walk in? And I'm like, oh, he's just making sure that I'm safe. And
Mm.
she actually told me at that time, she was like, you realize that that's domestic abuse. And I was like, no, 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 he's just overprotective. I never looked the word up. I never had a second thought about it. And there's so many people that find themselves in that. I can't tell you how many women and men I've had conversations with men that didn't realize that that's what it was. And so I think that it's really interesting to know that, you were having these conversations and you were helping people through it. And even through what you were doing, you didn't even realize that's what it was. You were analyzing, right? You were analyzing situation, you helping somebody heal. And so kind of all the other puzzle pieces for you didn't necessarily matter because you were just trying to help people get to a different space in their life. But I really, really love the simple fact that you have had this 360-degree view,
Yeah.
because I feel like that is something that we need to talk about a lot more, not to give the abusers a way out or a free card, but so
Mm.
those that have been through any type of situation understand that it is not your fault, that you did not keep yourself in there for any amount of time, that you don't have to keep beating yourself up. It doesn't mean you're stupid. It doesn't mean you're not educated. It just means that it's time to let go. And I have to say that when I dove into the science and the research behind why these people do some of the things that they do, that is actually when I was able to fully forgive my ex.
Mm.
Now, still don't like him. I do not have contact with him, but I don't despise him. I almost feel bad for him. I don't
Mm.
allow what it is that he did and say that that's okay, but I have made so much peace with it, knowing that, like, ultimately you are a sick individual, like mentally you're sick, and I feel sorry for you for that, and the fact that you will never know that you can go get help to figure out how to be a better person.
It's such a difficult situation to try to even begin to explain, which is why I no longer do long-term one-to-ones. Because for a person to believe that somebody that they've loved, liked, enjoyed, had really good times with, to understand how domestic violence works and to accept that somebody did it to you deliberately is usually beyond people's comprehension. And
Mm-hmm.
unless they get that nugget, unless they begin to understand and be able to let go of that little piece, which is so critical in this puzzle, you can't help them move forward because they keep coming back to saying, no, but he was going through this. And it can happen the other way around, incidentally. Obviously, men, women both can be victims, but they keep protecting the abuser, thinking, no, 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 this happened. He lost his job. His cousin was sick. Something happened to the car. They keep making excuses without being able to stop and look back and think about themselves. And so, this thing about what you just said, that you can understand why he did what he did and you have some level of feeling sorry for him. It's good that you can do that and let it go, because the problem is most people that get to that level keep feeling sorry for them and they need to stay in their own lane. I keep telling people, go there, touch it, and come back into your space. So once they've learned that there are some issues with their partner, it's okay to go to that space, but not for too long, because those boundaries getting blurred is really a complicated issue. And it's very problematic for the person that's experiencing the abuse, because it's a lot easier for them to slip back into feeling sorry than it is for them to move forward and figure out what they need, because we all need very different things in that kind of environment. So what my work has shown me is to give people as much information as you can, using stories, using facts where you can, and leave it with them. Because when I've tried in some cases early on, so we're going back many, many years, when I tried to say, can you see that this is what's happening? They normally have been 50-50 in terms of seeing whatever we were identifying. But the reasoning always ended up with, no, but he's doing that because.
Mm-hmm.
I know him, so that kind of martyr complex that I'm the only person that can save him because I know what he's gone through over 10, 15, 20, how many years it would be. So I had to leave people in that space and just keep giving them the information. The more information I gave and left with them, I found people took what they wanted and they started building themselves up internally. They did arrive eventually in that safe space of moving forward, but it was a really long, arduous journey. So when
Yeah.
I did my master's degree and the research I did with that, the women on that program had all left their partners, but they were in that state of chaos. You know, when you're lost, you're invisible, unseen, and unheard. And not just that, you feel you can't do anything. You're totally incompetent. I just gave them information. I talked about the narcissist, coercive control, the criminal justice system. And as you can probably tell, I'm not in the US criminal justice system, I'm in the UK justice system. But I gave them so much information that when they were navigating their lives in the different areas like social care, then education, then the justice system, they had all these tools. And I didn't even see it as that. I was just giving information that might help at some point. In 2.5 years, the ladies were all completely independent and free. And they said to me, Ruby, it's because of the information you gave me. And I thought, all this time, I've been working at trying to help people. When you try to help, you don't hit the sweet spot. When you give them what they need, they can take whichever mechanism they need for their life, and then they run with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you said, it's such a, I think the two words domestic violence are spoken of in an inappropriate way. And I say that only because whenever I've asked a woman, tell me what's happened to you, they inevitably use the word violence. He was violent towards me. He was such a violent man. Every single time I've asked these particular women, did he hit you? Did he punch you? Did he slap you? They've always said no, because violence to them has meant making me scared and so scared that I couldn't move. And when we override it by saying, no, this is this and this is this, we take away their agency to be who they want and take the time they need to arrive.
I love this so much too, because, this is something I have really started having conversations with people about. And that is because the word domestic violence for
Mm.
me doesn't necessarily mean what most people think it means. I gave a speech for a charity event for the Domestic Violence Center, and I actually had people raise their hand. And I was like, please show of hands if the word domestic violence or abuse means that somebody has hit you. And it was over half of the room. And then when I asked everybody, now for you that didn't, do you realize that it can mean emotional and psychological and
Mm.
financial? And they raised their hand. But what's really interesting is we have put such a label, an own definition of what the word abuse means, that we forget that abuse can be encompassed in so many different areas. And I'm not saying that it doesn't mean that these women didn't or men didn't get hit. I was hit. Was that the main form of my abuse? No, mine was more emotional and psychological. It was more of that coercive control, like you talked about, that a lot of us don't know what that word means. I mean, I just figured out what gaslighting was
Mm.
2 years ago. I've been out of my situation for 10 years, and I did not know what the word gaslighting meant. And so there's so much information, but we are not talking about this information. We're not educating people about
Mm.
this information. And like you said, a lot of us, because we are nurturing or because we want to help someone, we listen to their excuses, and their excuses become our excuses as to the reasons that we stay, the reasons why we allow them to do the things that we do, and the reason we continue to allow those things to happen. I mean, I know that, for example, that was me, for a really long time. And like you said, people don't realize that once they're in that frame of mind, You can't just flip a switch to see something different. And I love that you are giving this information and just putting it out there and putting it in front of people, because ultimately that really is what we need in order to figure it out. So I'm going to answer the big question that everybody wants to ask but never does ask. Why don't you leave? This is exactly why, because there's a lot more mental components and breaking down of things that are done. And then you become the person that makes the excuses for that person, just like a parent does for a terrible child. You don't want to see the bad in your child, so you make the excuses to feel better that your kid maybe isn't being a bully or they're not doing that. It's the same thing in relationships. You don't want people to think that you're in something like that. So you begin to say, oh, no, it's because of this. But what ends up happening is your brain doesn't realize that you are just kind of telling a small story. It starts to believe that that is your narrative and that is your reality. And that is what makes it so difficult to ultimately leave.
And again, the tiers, the layering. So you touched on coercive control and gaslighting. And yes, we can break them all down and break them apart, but they're layered. There's so many mechanisms of how they use those behaviors. And before you know it, and the reason that you can't get out of it is because they've actually now resided in your head and you don't even know it, because they've actually taken the you that exists and they've replaced it with them. And that thing that you just described, that, you take on their excuses, you make those excuses and those excuses become yours. That's what's happened. But I also need to add one thing, you're probably aware of it, but the people that are getting involved in these relationships target the person. So they target good people, people with good hearts, with good, kind intentions, because they know they can mess with them more. The minute you start standing up to them, if you do it too early on, you'll be out of the picture very quickly, because they know that they can't actually isolate you and they can't break you down. But when most of us do what we do, which is be kind and listen and protect and love and believe them, they're the people that they actually seek. It's almost like trying to find water in a desert. They find good people. They know how to find those good people. And
Mhm.
also, you mentioned children, which for me is my trigger point, because when I started doing this work, oh gosh, Kat, I started off in probation. Well, I didn't start off in probation. When I started in probation, I started with adults. So I was working with men who were committing all sorts of different offences. When I looked into their histories, so as a probation officer in England, we do a lot of intervention work.
Okay.
So you get to know their story from birth all the way through, whatever they're telling you and whatever other evidence you get to support that. When I was looking into their early years and in their education, most of them didn't have an education. Most of them had started drinking, taking drugs at young ages, and it may only have been, a little drink here and a little drink there, but it happened very early on. So we're not talking teens, we're talking preteen. So when I
Wow.
was looking at those things, I thought, well, what chance did they really have of having any kind of trajectory, unless they fell into the path of somebody good who took them aside and said, okay, I've got a shop here. Why don't you clean up? Why don't you do this? And take them down that road. So what I
Hmm.
started seeing was there was something happening much earlier on. And because I wanted to make a difference, all the work I do, I want to do the bit of work that makes a difference. I chose to leave probation and go to youth offending because I thought they're younger, I can work with them better. I don't know how much you know about youth work, but you have so many other obstacles. You have parents, you have teachers, you have all the other people they're involved with. So again, in
Yeah.
England, because you work holistically, it was so difficult getting through everything. But again, what I started noticing was it didn't start in the teens. It was starting much earlier. So their problems didn't start when they were 11, 12, 13. It wasn't a case of bullying that led them to do something. They'd been neglected. Their parents were having abusive relationships. So these children were being raised in that type of environment. But for me, it got even bigger because I thought, how do children get labeled, ADHD and ADD before they're 5, 6, and 7? And I was looking at this really closely, and I first of all, thought there was something wrong with me, which is what I normally do when I see something. I think, no, no, I've got a problem. Nobody else is saying it. I started looking at the fact that it actually went back to pregnancy. So if you're being born in a situation where mum and dad have an abusive relationship, you inherently are feeling that when you're inside the womb. And I thought, okay, I'm crazy here. And then as time went along, and I had other cases where I worked with children who had become violent towards an adult, a grandparent, but these were model students when I spoke to teachers, head teachers, learning mentors, all the people surrounding the child. They said we would want a class full of children like this child. And then I started working backwards. And that was when I got my first bits of evidence where the mums had said, in the pregnancy, my partner was abusive. He used to do this, this, and this. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I wasn't crazy. There is something going on much earlier. And then when they come into the world and mums do the best they can under the circumstances that they're in,
Mm-hmm.
they still miss the fact that even when you're holding your baby and loving your baby, when you're not fully present in your mind, that's what your baby's picking up. So you can be cleaning them and feeding them and doing everything, but you're not making that connection. So then these children grow up with labels. So can you imagine if you've been born labeled, and I'm your teacher, so I'm reading the paperwork and it says child such has ADHD, ADD. So I'm now going to cater for that child as having these problems instead of trying to figure out, okay, let me find out a little bit more and then work with the child. So you're coming into systems that are preset for you.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And you know what's really interesting is I've actually talked to a lot of people, and I know that there is some scientific studies that are also being done around when a woman is pregnant, depending on her situation, those things can be a part of that child. So if you're super stressed, if you are super high anxiety, like that can have a huge effect on the child before they're born. And what's really interesting is when I first heard about it, I was like, that is absolutely crazy. There's no way. But I also look back at where I was at
Mm.
during both of my children's pregnancies. And I know for a fact that during my youngest ones, I was in the middle of my abusive relationship. I
Mm.
vividly remember being held down and put a pillow over my face during some certain situations because I wasn't being able to be controlled or I was sobbing uncontrollably. Like I remember things like that. And then when I think about my son now and some of the things that he has done, I'm like, well, no wonder he's super quiet. No wonder he's super closed
Mm.
off. No wonder he doesn't trust a lot of people because in that situation at that time, I was not able to be around someone. I was not able to voice myself. I was not able to have my own opinion or be able to trust people. And then he ended up growing up in that environment. Now I left when he was 7, but still, like they talk about, you are a sponge at that age anyway. So everything that he saw and was aware of, that's what he inherently took as like, well, then this is what you do, right? And it took a really long time to continue to have conversations to talk with him about the things that he had experienced and then allow him to see who his father truly was, which is probably one of the hardest things to ever have to do, and then be able to help him puzzle piece it together now that he is 16. Like it really is amazing how the body holds on to traumas and how those traumas really do affect not just your body, but the way that your brain handles situations. And so to me, it makes perfect sense as to, why people are doing some of these things. Now, again, we're not saying that that makes it okay. What we're trying to help people understand is there is more behind it besides they're just an ass. Okay. They are. I get that. And there are so many other pieces behind it. And like I said, the one thing that really helped me be able to fully let go and stop resenting myself for the reasons why I stayed was learning and understanding the reasons why he is that way, his background, and some of the things that he went through. And again, you transition from this resentment and hatred to, I really feel sorry for you because it means that somebody didn't love you. It means that somebody didn't take the time to be there for you. It means that somebody didn't take the time to love you the way a mother or a father should. So you inherently grew up in turmoil and in chaos, and that became your normal. And because
Mm.
you don't recognize it and you're not willing to go and speak to someone, you have turned into this person now that is hurting other people.
Beautifully said and absolutely perfect, because that's what was happening with the men that I was supervising on probation. I have had grown men, 6 foot 3 and 4, sitting in front of me and crying, because I think what they found in me, because domestic violence is the area that I kind of specialized in, that when I spoke to them, they didn't feel threatened, they certainly didn't feel challenged, and they felt able to, maybe for the first time, speak about what was really happening internally. And yes, they weren't listened to. And yes, they didn't have anybody that cared. And the other thing was, they also didn't understand why they behaved the way they had to come into the criminal justice system. So when you haven't been listened to for so long, where do you take that? Which is also why we need to work on men and domestic violence, because there are so many good people that don't have a place to go and voice that issue. But I'm so glad that you've been able to recognize it, because it really does help in the parenting aspect. Like you said, those puzzles don't come together quickly, and you have to wait for your child to arrive and be ready to receive. You can keep putting those bits of information there for them, but they have to be ready to take the puzzle, the piece that they need, and put it back in, because they have to have that ownership. So those things are so much reliant on the person that's receiving. And that's why I do, like I said, that's why I do the giving of the information. Take what you need, because you know best what you need in your situation. I can see a lot of things because I've done a lot of cases, but I don't know your individual circumstances. Even when you choose to tell me everything, there are bits missing that you're going to forget to tell me, but also that you're experiencing that you don't even know you're experiencing.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
that's where it gets complicated for the children in particular. Another job, sorry, I've done so many things around domestic violence. I was working with very young children, and what I found was that they wanted to offload and share everything, but they also wanted to protect both parents. So that
Mm,
some parents had separated, some hadn't. And it's really important that children get given the permission that you're allowed to love both parents. They're still your parents. You don't have to take sides with good and bad. You will figure that out. And I think a lot of parents kind of want to fight one against the other, and they don't realize how much harm they're causing the child. So that
mhm.
space that you've created, I wish other parents would do that. Additionally, when a child's born, you can start reversing the effects of what's happened, but you can't if you don't know that you were in an abusive situation. So those first 3 to 6 months, the loving of the child and the holding of the child and the being fully present can reverse so much. You know, all the things that they've experienced in pregnancy, that touch, that feel, that connection, that safety that's created, can start reversing that very early on. But if the mums don't know, how do we help them realize that even though you're doing everything, you're not actually physically present, or emotionally present, I should say.
Yeah, and you know what's and I want people to understand this as well is you don't have to be in an abusive situation in order to have these feelings or to be
Mm.
stuck and not being present. There's a lot of other things that cause us not to be present, right? Whether it's distractions because of social media or the news or the drama that we get involved with people
Mm.
around us. And one of the things that we need to remember is you can be a really great person now, but there could still be things that you dealt with as a child yourself
Mm.
that are still haunting you. And so, in order to do anything differently, in order to want to do something different for your children, you have to be able to do something different for you. And I'd love for you to touch base on this, Ruby, because I know this is kind of your space as well, is what are some things that people can start with if they are wanting to just shift the way that they feel, maybe learn to be a little bit more present, learn to let go of some things, where can someone even begin? Because I feel like that can be such a daunting task when you start to think of all the things you've been through and you're like, okay, well, which one do I get rid of first?
Yeah. For me, the biggest thing that I ask everybody to do, and I talk to myself about this too, because it's so difficult, even when you're doing all the things you think are right, is to be kind to yourself. We're so critical of ourselves. We're very critical of others too, but we're probably kinder to others than we are to ourselves. So be kind and know, whatever thing it is that you're trying to address, you can do it. And you have to replace that negative thinking to begin with. So I use the words invisible, unseen, and unheard. So many women have brought that to me and said, Ruby, at 35, 38, 45, I feel completely invisible. And just from the little bit of work I do, I said, but how? Tell me why. Tell me why you're invisible, and why is it that you can't see yourself? So just working on those little things, they're not actually not little, they're quite big, but take one of whatever it is you have an issue with and start working on that. Because what happens is when you learn the techniques of managing one, you automatically start doing it to the other areas and you don't even know. But you have to pick that one. So when I was working with the women on my thesis, and I was talking to them individually, and they were saying, but I don't know this and I don't know that. And I said, so what is it you don't know? And then they would tell me what they didn't know, and I'd be sitting there going, I think you do know that. And that would have been the first time that they would have thought, yes, I do know that. And then when I'd ask the next question, they would answer their own questions, but they didn't realize that they already had all that strength within them because they've been put down so much that they can't see their greatness. Well, you see, this is where I come in really good. And I can help you bring that up because I know that we all have greatness in us. Some believe it more than others. But in all of those cases, with all of the women, every time they had an issue and they said, but I can't do this and I can't do that, every time I asked the question, they pretty much always told me what they were doing. And then when I'd say, so how is it that you're invisible? Because I see you, I hear you, and you seem very clear about what you're talking about. And I do that with children too. So when children say to me, if I hadn't done this, my mum and dad wouldn't have broken up. And I listen to the pain really. And then I say, well, tell me what it was you did that made your parents get a divorce. And then when you put them on the spot, so this is what's happened to me up until now, they can't think of anything. They literally cannot think of what they have done that's forced their parents to separate. And I said, so you as a child, what you're doing is you're just being, it's their job to take care of you. What's happening between them has got nothing to do with you. And as I worked on that, very simple children's language, not the language we're using, and they've sat there and it's almost been like a light bulb moment. And I thought, this is how not having a safe space, not having a place to be able to just be, controls you and breaks you down. And all it takes is for one person to come along and just be there. You don't even have to say anything. They just need to know that you're a safe person. I have a website and I have a number of videos on there. There's a very tiny one called Timekeeper, and they show how domestic violence happens in the home. And this is without the shouting and the screaming. You know that chilling kind of feeling where you're not just on eggshells. It doesn't matter what you do, you're in the wrong. So you walk into a home and that atmosphere is there just to destroy you. So basically, it's a family, husband, wife, and child. The child goes to school and he has a teacher who understands what this is. She doesn't do anything much with him, but she takes him out into the kind of garden that they have. So he's now free just to have air, trees, leaves, and let everything roll off of him and do his work and just be able to be. And it starts releasing that pent-up energy that he has. I just thought something as simple as that, because the teacher understood that instead of when the child was being rude or disrespectful or shouting for her to say, okay, we're going to take you to the principal, she knew something else was happening and she tried other mechanisms first. Simple things like that can start unlocking and enabling a child to maybe say what they need to. or talk about something that's happening inside. Does that feel like it's covered a
Oh,
few?
yes. I'm just like taking it all in because there's so many things that I want to say, and I know we're almost out of time. Um, Ruby, we may just have to have you back for another discussion. But I want to bring this to people's attention, just to kind of reiterate what you were saying is sometimes all that people need is just to know that there is a safe space to be. And so I know that there are a lot of people that are like, well, I know of someone that went through this. How can I help them? They just need to know that you are a safe place to be, that you see them, that you appreciate them, and that you love them for who they are. Because when you are going through this, whether it's from your childhood or relationship, you feel as if you have been completely broken, and there is no way that anyone can see you past those pieces. And what's really interesting is when people learn to not try to fix it, but just be there, it allows that person to pull all of those pieces together and feel whole again. I love to use this example, and I've talked about this a little bit, but my husband was that for me. When him and I got together, I, one, dumped everything on him so that he knew what he was getting himself
Mm,
into. But two, when I would have certain flashbacks or triggers that happened, what I started doing, which was really, really hard in the beginning, was I would stop the conversation or come back to and say, hey, I need to tell you something. This has nothing to do with you. This has everything to do with me, but I need to teach my brain that this is no longer the truth. And so I would walk him through the scenario and I would say, hey, like you said this, and I know that you were joking, but this is how I took it. This is where my brain went. And what was really awesome was he didn't try to interrupt me. He didn't try to fix it and be like, but that's not what I was doing. He just listened. And then afterwards, he just reassured me that, yeah, you're right. That's all I was doing. I wasn't, and that's all that it took. And so being able to do that in a safe space
mm.
allowed me to then retrain my brain to understand what was this new reality and get rid of this reality that I had been living in for so many years. And so I just want people to hear this and understand that whether it's a child or an adult, sometimes it's not about fixing it and asking them tons of questions to get them to tell you things so you can tell them what they need. It's just listening and letting them verbalize themselves, because a lot of times when we do, we start to put the pieces together and then the brain starts to catch up. And that's honestly a lot of times what we're doing. And I feel like that's what I did for a really long. I still do it. There are still times, not as much, but there are still scenarios where I'm like, this really worries me, this really triggers me, or whatever the case may be. And we just walk through it. And after I talk it out, it's so much easier for my brain to go, oh, okay, so what used to happen isn't going to happen. So we're good. We can put that to rest. And that's all that a lot of people need. I think that we complicate things a lot more than they need to be because we feel like healing is this huge deal. Don't get me wrong, it is. But
Mm.
there are so many simplistic ways to put yourself in that journey to lead you in a different direction to give you that peace back that you've been searching for.
I fully agree and support everything you said, but I do have to bring in the proviso. You're with a very good person right now. So you have to make sure that you're with a safe person, like you said. I think
Mm-hmm.
you're very fortunate, and I hope it stays that way, and God willing, it will. But there are going to be people, and unfortunately, I've worked with too many women who are in second, third, and fourth situations where they keep offloading, the person becomes a shoulder to cry on, and then they're also abusive using the same
Mm-hmm.
information. So we have to be careful when we're sharing that, because whilst you've had the good experience of somebody listening, paying attention, and then you being able to park it, unfortunately, there are a lot of people that don't get that. So, there's that little proviso that be careful when you're entering another relationship, protect yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
And, if the person's just listening to your story and not showing enough of theirs, you need to be thinking twice. So I don't want to put any dampeners in the
No, I
place, but
love that. Thank you
I
for
think
that follow-up.
it's for each of us, that journey of finding the safe person is quite difficult because when you've been through so much, you start thinking negatively. But it's good that your story is a great one to end on because it is. You've had such a tough journey and you've arrived in a really good space and you're working with your children as well. So all of that is wonderful. And that's where we're trying to take people, men and women and children too.
Yeah. I love this. No, I appreciate that. I love that you filled in those spaces and those gaps and make sure that people are being aware of their situation and who they're sharing with. So Ruby, do me a favor then as we come to a close. Please share with us either a quote or a piece of advice you would like to leave the audience with.
I would like people to know whatever happens to you in your life, good, bad, and indifferent, your body keeps the score.
I love that so much.
And we can heal. We can always heal.
Oh, that's such a beautiful thing to end on, Ruby. Thank you so much. Please do us a favor. Tell everybody where they can find you, how they can connect with you, how they can be in your world.
So I have a website, www.insurer.com, which I think you'll post beneath the episode, and an email, info.insurer@gmail.com. Please contact me or please go onto the website. There's lots of free resources. I'm trying to put as much information as I can for victims, practitioners, and everyone else to just take what they need and contact me. If you need me, I'll be there.
I love that so much. Ruby, thank you again so much for all of your insight, all of your knowledge, and really being able to share more than one side of something that's so complicated in our society, I feel like.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciated it, Kat. Thank you.
You're so welcome. To everybody else out there, take a deep breath, shake it all out, especially for you that have been in situations like this, that this may have been an interesting moment for you to sit through. Don't let it just sit in your body. Make sure you're moving around. I know that this can be a tough conversation, and if we don't have the tough conversations, how on earth are we supposed to make a difference? So please be aware of your surrounding. Please be aware of other people that you are around as well. And just know that sometimes the easiest thing for you to do is just sit with someone and know that you are their safe space and you are the person that they can just feel seen by. Sometimes that's all that we need. And I know that that seems so simple, but I think we tend to complicate wanting to fix and help everyone. So until next time, do one thing positive for someone each and every day and see the difference that it makes in your life. So until next time, catch you later. Thank you so much for tuning in to Real Chat with Kat today, where real stories meet real solutions. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review on Apple, and share this with someone who may also need to hear this as well. Let's also keep the conversation going. Follow me on socials at The Lotus Effect, connect with our incredible guests, and remember, you are never alone. Your story matters, and you have the ability and the power to rewrite it. You always have a choice. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and keep showing up as the incredible, unstoppable